What do we know about the latest leak of US secrets? US national security agencies and the Justice Department are scrambling to determine the source, scale and sensitivity of what appears to be the most serious spillage of US intelligence in years. The documents appear to contain information on everything from the war in Ukraine to North Korea's weapons program and France's relations with Africa.
Safe to say this is one of the most damaging intelligence leaks this century so far.
Let's take a closer look at some of the key revelations. The most sensitive content is what appears to be operational information about the war in Ukraine, including details about the country's air defense vulnerabilities. There are also predictions about how China would respond to Ukrainian strikes inside Russia, as well as details of a purported internal discussion among South Korean officials about pressure from the US on Seoul to help supply weapons to Ukraine. Aside from the Ukraine war, there's information about Iran's nuclear capabilities and North Korea's missile tests. France's security goals in West and Central Africa also come under scrutiny, with an assessment that they will not be met.
About 20 pages are serial intelligence reports produced by different agencies. A serial report is a one-paragraph, concise reporting on a specific issue in a specific country. The other 20-some pages are maps and war updates from Ukraine.
Are the documents real, and how were they leaked? Pictures of creased documents were posted on platforms across the internet, including Discord, 4chan, Telegram and Twitter. US officials believe most of the material is genuine. Some documents, however, appear to have been altered to show inflated US estimates for Ukrainian battlefield casualties, as well as understated numbers for Russian forces.
It appears that whoever had access to the files had them in print form, because otherwise why would you take pictures of them and then distribute the pictures? And so that means we could simply be looking at, we have to include very mundane explanations, like somebody could have literally lost a bag of classified documents, or somebody could have had access to that suitcase in some car, whatever it was. So there could be some very unusual explanations for what is, after all, a very unusual, leak or spillage of information here.
The open source investigation site, Bellingcat, said it had found evidence that the documents, or at least some of them, had appeared on social media as far back as March or even January.
And now to what's being called the biggest breach since Edward Snowden. American intelligence has been compromised yet again. Hundreds of documents have been leaked. These are papers marked as top secret. They're about the war in Ukraine, about America's assessment of the conflict. They have maps, charts and photographs, and most importantly, they have American intelligence from both sides, Ukraine and Russia. This is classified information. It's the kind of stuff that is not shared with the public and not spoken about in press conferences. These are American national security secrets, and now they've been leaked. They're out on social media platforms. The biggest revelation is this: a US assessment about the war in Ukraine. Washington is not confident about Ukraine's air defenses. It fears that Kiev could soon run out of missiles, and without immediate assistance, it could suffer serious setbacks. Now you could say, none of this is a secret really. It's evident to anyone who's following the war. And you'd be right. But here's why this is significant. Publicly, the Americans say Ukraine is winning the war. Privately, they feel Ukraine is vulnerable. And this private assessment is now public. It's embarrassing for the US establishment. And it is damaging for Ukraine. Remember, in war, information is also a weapon. That is why it is so carefully guarded and managed. So this leak is definitely a loss. And we're not talking about 1 or 2 documents here. We're talking about almost 100 top secret documents. Almost 100 documents have been leaked. They appeared on internet platforms like Twitter, 4chan, and Telegram. It's not clear who leaked them, but the papers look photographed, as if someone took them out of a folder and clicked photos and then published them online. American officials are probing the source of the leak, and the papers reveal a lot. We'll cover the highlights tonight, starting with Ukraine's ability to defend itself. The leaked papers say that Ukraine is running out of supplies, specifically missiles for air defense. And this assessment dates back to February this year. So it's more than 2 months old, more than a month old rather. It said that Ukraine is rapidly using up its stockpile, and by the 2nd of May, it could exhaust its air defenses. Now let me repeat, this was the assessment in the month of February. We cannot say if it holds today or if Ukraine's stockpile is depleting at the same pace or faster or slower. But we do know that Kiev still depends on the West and that Zelensky has repeatedly asked allies to speed up deliveries. So it is possible that Kiev would need more missiles and that without them, it would be vulnerable. Russia will get an opening then to launch more aerial attacks. A Ukrainian colonel was asked about these leaks. He refused to comment on the specifics, but he did say that allies should speed up assistance. In fact, I have that statement with me. This is what he says: if we lose the battle for the skies, the consequences for Ukraine will be very serious. This is not the time to procrastinate. Clearly, the risk is real, and this is only one part of the leaked documents. What else do they say? They confirm what the world has long known, that America likes to spy both on allies and adversaries. These papers have revelations from Canada. This is about a Canadian gas pipeline. It was compromised by a Russian hacking group in February, and the US had an assessment about it. It said the hackers were being guided by Russia's FSB. FSB is the Russian Federal Security Service. It is the successor to the infamous spy agency KGB, of which President Putin was once a member. Meanwhile, the leaked papers also talk about Israel, about the recent protests against Prime Minister Netanyahu's judicial reform. You may remember those, the large-scale protests. They were arguably the biggest ever in Israel. Now, the Pentagon had a view on these protests. It says this was the work of Mossad. Mossad is Israel's spy agency. The Pentagon believes that Mossad backs the protest against Prime Minister Netanyahu, and that it encouraged its staff and Israeli citizens to participate in these protests. This is quite a dramatic claim. If proven, it could have serious consequences in Israel. For now, Israel has disputed it. The American papers also mention the possibility of Israel supplying weapons to Ukraine. It hasn't happened yet, Israel supplying weapons to Ukraine, but American officials have gamed out that scenario. South Korea, too, features in the leaks. Apparently, Seoul is torn between backing Ukraine and upholding its own policy. What policy? South Korea has a policy of not providing lethal weapons to a country at war. Now, the US believes they're debating this policy. And of course, Russia is a prominent feature in the American leaks. One of the documents says Russia is prepared to give a bonus to its troops. A bonus for what? For damaging or destroying a NATO tank in the battlefield. There's also an assessment on the Wagner Group. It says Wagner is working to thwart American interests in Africa. Wagner is a group of mercenaries. Again, none of this is a top secret, really. But the papers give you an insight into how America reads the current developments. Now, the question is, who leaked these documents? And why did they do it now? Did the Russians do it to embarrass the US? Did the Americans do it themselves to make a point? Was it Ukraine to force America's hand? Or a third party seeking to influence Washington's ties and moves? Honestly, we don't know. But the revelations could make allies think twice about sharing information with the US.